Okay.
still coming in, so feel free to filter in and find a seat wherever you can. So I'm really delighted to start back up with the Dementia Cares Forums again. We do have them scheduled out. If you didn't see the handout,
I guess we're getting ready to start,
we do
huh?
have 2 weeks from today a neuropsychologist who will be coming down from Tucson for us, which is a really big deal for me to get. These are very, very busy people. To have them come down and talk about the role of testing and neuropsychology in this whole arena. So she'll be with us in 2 weeks, and then in December, Nicole Thomas, who is with Pima Council on Aging, will be with us, and she's part of their dementia-capable team at Pima Council on Aging. And she'll be talking particularly about the holidays and how to work through navigate the holidays with families when you have the issue of dementia or memory loss. So that's just for the rest of this year, and then we've got, after the first of the year, we also have presenters. So just want to let you know that. And we weren't able to get everybody scheduled for the same Thursday of the month, so we just do the best that we can. But so the neuropsychologist will be with us in 2 weeks, so that's November the 7th, right? Yeah. And also to remind you about our Memory Cafe. Memory Cafe is a socializing event for people with dementia or experiencing memory loss and their loved ones. It's a socializing journey, so allowing people who may not have a lot of opportunity to socialize, to be a part of that. And just really glad for the work that's being done by some of our wonderful volunteers who are here today. Thank you for all of that. Also glad to see Lynn Severe with us from Green Valley Cares. There is information about that, and I'm sure Lynn would be happy to answer any questions that you might have about the work that they do as a team. So with that, I'll turn this over to Nicole. I got Nicole's name from the other Nicole Thomas, with Pima Council on Aging. And I said, I'm looking for speakers. Who might you recommend? And right away she said, Nicole Smith. So I don't know if it's a fraternity of Nicole people, but I'm delighted. I learned a little bit about her from Nicole Thomas, and then also got her book, so which she has here in case you're interested in getting that. So with that, Nicole, I'll turn it over to you, and away you go.
Thank you. Hello, can you hear me okay? Yes. Okay, I tend to start talking really fast sometimes, so just wave your hand and say stop if I get going on a tangent. So yeah, my maiden name is Johnson, and then I married a Smith, so now I just need maybe my next husband will be a Jones, I don't know. But yeah, so my name is Nicole Smith, and we moved to Oro Valley just about a year ago. My husband retired, so I live in Oro Valley, and this is state number 9 for me. So I was born and raised in Iowa, and then my parents got divorced, and then I was in Texas, then Missouri, then New York, then DC, then San Francisco, then San Diego, then Jersey, and then here. So very exciting. And along the way, you know, I met my husband, and we had 5 children, and we moved around. And so I still have 1 at home in high school. So I have 2 out of college, 2 in college, and 1 in high school at home, who's about to get his driver's license. So be glad you live way far away from him. So yeah, so I'm gonna try not to cry. I just start. So I am the dementia daughter. So all my parents are still living. So my mother is living in memory care in Tucson. She's in memory care. My father, so my parents got divorced when I was young. My father lives in Iowa, where I grew up with my stepmother. And my stepmother has dementia also. My mom has Alzheimer's. My stepmother has primary progressive aphasia, which is what Bruce Willis and Wendy Williams have. And then about the same time all this happened, my dad he had surgery for normal pressure hydrocephalus. So that's when there's fluid on the brain, and it can affect your mental faculties or your physical, and his was more physical. And so it was a resounding success, and he has been able to do amazing, he's back to everything that he does. He's very active. And so it was a one night in the hospital, University of Iowa Hospital, and they drilled a hole in his skull and put a tube in, and away we go. So, modern medicine is pretty amazing, except if you have dementia. They just haven't figured that part out yet. So I became a caregiver before I even knew what a caregiver was. And so I was living in New Jersey with my children, and my mother lived in Los Angeles. And my aunt, my mother's older sister, who has been a nurse for over half a century, so like I said, hail to the nurses. So she knew, she was living in Maryland. So we've got New Jersey, we've got Maryland, and we've got Los Angeles. And she, we're all big, giant Catholic family, but we're pretty close. But my aunt knew something was going on with my mother, and she facilitated some of the initial testing and things like that. And she told me, she's like, you need to fly out to Los Angeles to go to this neurology appointment with your mother. I can't go, you need to fly out. My sister lived 10 minutes away, but she couldn't be bothered, which is another story. So, so I flew out, and we had my mom's first neurology appointment on March 17th, 2020. And if you recall, that was the week that COVID was like shutting down the world. I didn't know if I was gonna be able to get home, but I did. So we went to that first neurology appointment, and I flew all the way to go to this appointment, and we were sitting there with a neurologist, and my mom wasn't very happy about this, but we were there. And the neurologist asked her some basic questions. How's your sleeping? How's your exercise? How's your habits? And fine. And she says, do you smoke? And my mom looks at her deadpan and says, well, I smoke, but I don't inhale. So I started dying laughing, and the doctor kind of smirked, but I was immediately sent out of the room. Because my mom, and so anyway, I'm like, okay, why am I here? But fortunately, they were able to get my Aunt Nancy on the phone, and the neurologist and my Aunt Nancy and my mom they got the information they needed. So I flew home, and then we had the pandemic, and my mom was living alone in Los Angeles, and we didn't have a diagnosis at that point, but we knew something was going on. And I invited her to come back to our bubble, and she wouldn't come back and be in our bubble. She loved living in Southern California, who doesn't? And my sister was close, but my sister has asthma, and she was terrified that she was gonna die if she went over to my mother's, because my mom would go to the grocery store. I mean, she would wear her mask, but she wanted to get out because she was isolated and she was lonely. And I called her all the time, but that's just not the same. So by the time I finally got back out there, months later, her being alone definitely accelerated the progression of the dementia. So she was in, and I didn't know anything about dementia. The only thing I knew about Alzheimer's was Ronald Reagan had it, and he was over 80, and he lost his memories, and that's what happens when you're old. That's all I knew about dementia, and my mom was only like 76 at the time. So I started learning more about dementia, but it was, at first, I was just, she was very difficult. My mother's a very feisty person. She always has been. She raised 2 feisty daughters, and she was having none of it. So she did not want to leave her house. She started making things up. She said she had all the money in the world, but she was getting to a point where she couldn't afford to stay in her house. So that was part of the problem. And she said she would look at moving, but she was really kind of playing us a little bit. So she was cognitive enough to drive us insane and losing it sometimes. But she was very combative, paranoid, accusatory. And I learned all these things are signs of dementia. But I just thought it was my mom being difficult because she's always been difficult. So I called them mom mantras. So I would, we'd talk about something. She'd go on for 40 minutes about why she was in charge of her finances and her bills, and she had everything under control because she always had. And then the other thing that kept happening is, so I would fly out and hang out for a little bit and try and figure out how to convince her to move or start going through things, and then I'd have to fly home. And then Nancy would fly out and she'd work with her, but she was very, very mean and very difficult, and we kind of took turns. And then when neither of us could be there, we'd get these calls on the answering machine or the phone, and she'd be, I'm going to take a bottle of pills, I'm going to kill myself, I'm going to drive off the highway. You know, she was constantly threatening suicide, so we were terrified about that. And so, you know, we'd fly out there, and I'd get there, and she'd be all happy, and then the next morning she would come down, and she's like, thank you for coming, so glad we had a little chat, but I've decided I'm just going to stay in my home until you can leave now. This happened so many times. So it got worse and worse, and so I started learning more about dementia, because my husband said, he goes, you were so mean before, but then you turned into a giant wallflower. I was like, well, because I got it. It wasn't her, it was the disease, and that was part of the disease, and part of it was her depression and her psychotic break, and so there was a lot of things going on, but I didn't know what we were going to do or how we were going to figure this out. And we had to sell our house, we had to move her stuff, but she was having none of it. And so I hired an elder law attorney in Los Angeles, in Pasadena. And so the cool thing about him was he had relatives that had dementia, so he got it from a personal and hi Margie. He got it from a personal and a professional standpoint. So that was very helpful, and so he started to educate me about what we could do and how to navigate this. But the biggest problem with my mother's situations is she had all of her trust and her will and her powers of attorney. She had all of that done, but in California and most places you can't physically remove a person from their home if they refuse. So other than throwing her in like a straitjacket and hauling her out of there, we had no course of action. And so it was very, very difficult. And the other thing she did is she was very responsible with the legal documents. So it was my Aunt Nancy, the nurse, and myself, and my sister. So we were all named as power of attorney and executor and all that stuff, but she would get mad at us in turn. Like, we kept rotating who's the favorite person. So then she would change all the documents, call her attorney, have them change, and then the attorney would change it and bill her $1,000 and send her a new set. So, I mean, we were all working in tandem, but, we're like, this is not sustainable, but the attorney didn't know she had dementia, and there's a lot of families that change their stuff all the time, and really, it happens. And then, so my Aunt Nancy sent her an email saying stop, but she didn't stop, and then literally 2 years later, I'm looking, my aunt typed one wrong letter in the email, so she never got it. So finally, when I hired my elder law attorney, he called her to issue cease and desist. So I mean, it's like you can't make this stuff up. So, and so the attorney was very helpful, and he kept pushing conservatorship. You got to do a conservatorship. That's the only way you can get her out of the house, and that's very expensive, and it's the government oversight and the tracking. And I looked into it and watched some videos, but I was just hesitant to do that, just because I was like, there's got to be a better way. And so finally, we were getting to the point where it was getting pretty desperate. And so I said, okay, if we do this conservatorship, what do we do? And he said, okay, well, I will get it expedited, and we'll get her into court this week, and we'll talk to the judge, and then the process starts. And I said, well, then we move her out, right? And he's like, no, you have to wait for the courts. That's going to take 6 to 8 months. I'm like, what? But the other thing that we were investigating on the side was that my aunt, since she was a nurse, and she ran a hospital in LA, and they worked my mom, my aunt, and my sister all had a consulting business in LA, so they knew the whole healthcare system there. And my aunt said, we can either try and get her into behavioral health or into the ER to behavioral health. There's like that avenue we can try. But that was, again, my mom's so difficult. The other thing I'll point out is that the driving was horrible. When she eventually got her neurology, Alzheimer's diagnosis, the state of California, they're required to notify the DMV. And so my mom got the notice from the DMV that she wasn't supposed to drive. And my mom loved her car and loved her independence and loved driving. And she did the old well, I still have a driver's license so I can drive. Right? I have checks, so I must have money. Right? So, but so she kept driving, and they said, well, you can disable the car, right? Well, she had 2 mechanics that were her best buddies, And you know, we're navigating this, right? And I'm like, well, is it appropriate to go to the mechanic and say, hey, she's got dementia, you can't fix her car? Like you don't know where the boundaries are or what you're supposed to do. So then we finally just took the keys. So we took the keys, and then a couple days later, we get a call from her neighbor. She's like, there's a locksmith man in front of your mom's house. She paid $1,500 to have new keys made and took off in the car. So she would have these moments of clarity and just wreak havoc. And so then, I mean, I talk about this in the book. So then we're like, well, my sister's like, well, let me just take the car and I'll hide it in my apartment building. And she knew, like, somehow she knew. She's like, so she called the cops. And the cops are like, well, yeah, no, it's her property. Even if she has dementia and doesn't have a valid license, we'll have to arrest you for stealing her car. So, I mean, it's like, you're like, okay, what are we going to do? So eventually what happened is that my mom kept we were looking at senior living places because she had had her own mother in a senior living place nearby, and she was going to try and move into assisted living first. So she would look at them, and she told us she put a deposit down when she really didn't, and she knew we were getting more and more frustrated. So her and my Aunt Nancy have always been extremely close. They used to live together in California. They had the business together, but Nancy had moved to Maryland to be near her kids. And so she said, well, fine, maybe I'll just move to Maryland and be near Nancy, and I'd be fine with that. And so she flew with my sister from Los Angeles to the Baltimore area to spend the week with Nancy looking at senior living places out there. And that was all fine. So they got there on Saturday. On Sunday, my sister flew back to LA, and then Monday morning, all hell broke loose. Because, so at Monday morning, all at the same time, my sister woke up and had a text from Mom that she was out of there. Nancy called me and said, your mom's not here. And then, I mean, we're like, okay, where'd she go? Because all of a sudden she disappeared in the middle of the night and nobody knew where she went. And it was cold, it was January. And she had this little coat. And so long story short, what ended up happening is she left in the middle of the night, and she took her little roller bag and walked. My aunt lives kind of in Ellicott City, which is kind of a urban little area, and she found some guys coming out of a bar, and she asked them to take her to a hotel, and then she ended up at BWI Airport, ready to go back to LA, and was intercepted with the airport security and my aunt and everything, and so it was, and so then, and then she also broke her wrist in the middle, like, it's like all stuff. There was a lot of stuff going on. So eventually we ended up in New Jersey. We took her to the ER in New Jersey. So I drove back to New Jersey, took her to the ER, and she was really mad. And then they took her there, and then she proceeded into their little sections into psychology. And then they moved her to a behavioral health facility in New Jersey. And then we moved her directly into memory care near my aunt in Maryland. So it took like a month. And in the middle of that time, I flew back to LA, cleaned out the house of 20 years and, 4 bedrooms, and packed it all up and, whatever, got it ready for sale. And so it's just like, and then in the middle of this, my dad had vertigo, and he was in the hospital. And I mean, like, it's just like, yeah, I call my life whack-a-mole. My life is whack-a-mole now. So, because there's something literally every day. So, so my mom lived in memory care in Maryland for 2 years near Nancy, and I would go back and forth from Jersey to go visit her like every 3 weeks. And then we moved to Tucson for my husband's retirement about a year ago. And then in January, just of this year, we moved my mom to a Watermark property in Tucson. So she's near me, which was the grand plan, but it just took a while to execute. And then I still go back to Iowa to see my dad and check on my stepmom, and she's getting worse, and she's on the wait list for memory care, and my dad had a shot in his knee, and like, he's like, everyone's managing, but it's like, it's okay until it isn't, and you just never know. And the 2 times I went back to Jersey over the summer and Memorial Day, of course, Mom had a UTI, and I thought she was gonna die, and then they called the EMTs, and like, so I moved her near me, and then the 3 incidents she's had, I was out of town for every time, so can't win. But I don't know, so that's like 20, that's kind of the story. So we're still on whack-a-mole. And
could we all just take a deep breath? Nicole, we're just breathing for you. We are breathless just in your telling the story. So thank you.
I know. Well, I will say thank God for my Aunt Nancy, who loves her sister dearly, and she was like my rock. And my husband's a CPA, so he's been taking care of the taxes and all, you know. So I have my team. Yeah, I mean, and again, it's like every day. So my mom is one of 6. So there's 4 girls and 2 boys, and they grew up in Iowa. So the oldest sister is 89, and she lives in Chicago with her daughter, and she has vascular dementia. So she's had it for maybe a decade. Number 2 sister lives in Orlando, surrounded by her 4 kids. And she's had a bunch of hip surgeries since she was in her 30s. She had some kind of bone thing, but she fell about 6 weeks ago and now has a traumatic brain injury, and she's on hospice as of yesterday. So my aunt's flying out there. My Aunt Nancy, the nurse, is 80. So Carolyn's 87. Nancy's the nurse. She's 83, and she's flies all over the world and works out and active in her church. Like, she's a dynamo. And then my mom is 79, and she's got Alzheimer's. So, and then the 2 boys are fine. But so I mean, it's like I'm living it through my family and my extended family. And so I just took a deep dive into dementia. My husband retired, we moved here, and I just constantly wanted to learn more. And while I was going through this, I just started writing to process everything. And then it turned into a book. And I thought, well, maybe I can, because it's just going to get worse, and there's more people going through it. And I was like, well, if I can help educate people and take away the stigma and offer some support or some ideas, then that's what I'm here to do. Okay, so does anyone have any questions, or do you want more? I mean, I'm here, yeah. So I don't know if you want me to just talk more if you have questions. Yeah, here. Here we go.
Would you say that being a caregiver might be disruptive to your life?
Well, I'm lucky. Like I said, I'm lucky. My husband retired. I only had the one. You know, we did move cross country in the middle of all this too, which was not super easy, but we did it. But I tell people my holy trinity of sanity is exercise, beer, and chocolate. So I pretty much do this every day, and I'm good. So that works for. So as long as you have, like, so again, I have my Aunt Nancy, super solid, rock solid caregiver, partner, advisor, everything, and then my husband with all his help, and then yoga, beer, and chocolate, I definitely am selfish about self-care, and everyone's like, oh, self-care, and this other mug I saw the other day, it said, self-care stresses me out, which it can, but I've always been good at self-care because I had 5 kids, and I have always just been, I was never a major athlete or anything like that, but I always exercised. It calms my mind, it calms my nerves. And they tell you this, I mean, if I take care of myself first, then I have more energy to take care of my kids or my parents. And I like to cook, so I make a lot. I'm a quinoa freak. I make a big pot of quinoa every week, and I put it on literally everything that I eat. So, but I also eat chocolate and beer, and I eat good stuff, bad stuff, spinach. So, but that's my thing.
So, Nicole, what would be the resource? You said you were doing all this research.
Yeah.
What's the resource that you found most helpful for you?
Well, what I tell everybody is the powers of attorney. So the powers of attorney, have them done for yourself, or people my age, yourself and your parents, and then your kids if they're over 18. So in New Jersey we had the Karen Ann Quinlan case and different, and my kids, they won't do it, so whatever. Anyway, in theory. So the powers of attorney for healthcare, the powers of attorney for finance, and Arizona has a power of attorney for mental health. We're one of the only states that does. So get those done. So went through all this with my mom, and then my dad at about the same time, I called my dad. I said, do you have all your documents done, your will? And he's like, no, I'm not doing my documents because I don't want to die. And if I do my will, I'm going to die. So I'm going to do it, not doing them. And I'm like, okay, that's very mature, Dad. So then I fly to Iowa, and I said, I'm coming, and every state is so different with the documents, right? I said, I don't know Iowa law, I'm not an attorney, so I'm going to find an attorney, an elder law attorney in Iowa to figure this out, because we're going to do something, or else I need to know, Because the other thing that I learned is if you're of sound mind, if your parents are of sound mind, they have the right to make the wrong decision. It's like whatever his decision is, I might say it's wrong, but he's a grown man. He can do what he wants. I'm just going to have to deal with all of it. So I said, well, I'm going to meet with an attorney. And he goes, no, I've got an attorney. I know this guy from the bar. I'm like, oh, great. And his name is Flip. I'm like, okay, great. Let's meet with Flip. So we meet with Flip. Because about that time, my stepmom was diagnosed. And I said, well, because that's a gray area, the dementia and the legal documents. I said, we need to get her stuff. They've always had separate accounts, my dad and my stepmom. I said, we need to get her stuff done, stat, and then we need to get yours done. And she's very close with her brother, and he's a super smart guy. So we brought him in. He facilitated her getting all of her stuff done because my dad and stepmom had no children together, and she had no children. So her brother helped with that, and they used Flip, and then Flip proceeded to lose all the documents. Okay. But I hired my own attorney from a reputable firm, and we flew into town. I said, Dad, I'm meeting with this guy. I said, you can choose to come or you don't have to come, but I'm going because I need to figure this out. And so he came, and he felt like he'd been run over by a truck, but he listened, and then he eventually got his stuff done, but it took 18 months to get him comfortable with signing. And I said, I don't want your money. You can, he's got the home cat and the farm cat. I'm like, give all the money to the cat shelter, but we need to get this done. But it was good because they had money in Minnesota. They had money, and so it was good to. Oh, he worked for IBM. He had IBM stock certificates from the 70s. Still, So my husband's like, that's going to be a problem. So then I got the full education of the whole elder law attorney thing from that. But anyway, so powers of attorney are critical. And the other thing I just tell people all through the book, I say, have the conversations. And I'm close with my parents, but it was still hard to say, well, I need to know your doctors, and what are your wishes, and do you want to be intubated? And you can't, it's a lot of conversations. It's gradual. It's a comfort level. And none of us wants to talk about this, but I talk about it all the time now. So because it's so important to have what do you want, what do you not want. The other document that a lot of people don't know about is the POLST or the MOLST. It's the Physician Order for Life-Sustaining Treatment. It's a separate document. It's not a DNR. It's a completely separate document that you fill out with your physician that goes deeper into what kind of wishes do you want. Do you want intravenous antibiotics? Do you want intravenous feeding? Do you want IV? Do you want a trach tube? Do you want? So you talk about, because we don't know what's in store for us. We don't know, and we'd all love to just die in our sleep like The Notebook, right? Perfect ending. But this is not the movies. This is real life, and you don't know what's going to happen.
So, you told me I could interrupt.
Yeah, I know. Anything's fine.
Just how long did it take with your mom to get the diagnosis of dementia? Was it from when you first began to suspect?
I know it all blurs together, and So it took. It probably took a year, and so it took a year. I said, how long did it take to get mom diagnosed? So an official diagnosis took probably about a year, and the critical reason we had to get diagnosed for mother, get an official diagnosis, is because, again, she had her trust in her will and everything, and in those documents, we had no control over everything unless the term said she had to be declared incapacitated by 2 separate physicians in order to invoke the terms of the trust. Well, physicians aren't lawyers, and they don't want to mix. And so my aunt, because she'd been in the healthcare industry forever, because she was so in touch with these doctors and talking to them and in the portal, it still took 8 months to get those doctors to actually write the letter, sign the letter. Because the PCP my mom had, she was a younger woman, and she said to my aunt, she's like, I've never done this before, and I'm scared, and I don't want to do this. So it took, and we had to have those letters in order to sell her house and do everything we needed to do. And again, so that took 8 months. Nothing happens quickly in any way, shape, or form. And so, but it was about a year. But then the letters, it all takes a lot of time. So that's why I'm saying you can make things go a lot easier and a lot smoother if you have all the conversations on the front end instead of scrambling on the back end. Yeah, so there's like the 5 wishes, the conversation project, death over dinner. There's a lot, and even if whatever kind of financial advisor you have, most of the companies, Fidelity and Ameriprise, like a lot of the financial advisors have kind of their own document that will kind of help you facilitate these conversations, ask you the questions, have places for you to record different things. So, well, that's the other thing I learned. So even though we had the wills, now we had the trust, we had all the stuff, well, if you've got a CD, none of that matters. You have to have a payable on death, a designated beneficiary on that. Or if you're in the, if you've got financial assets, you have to have a beneficiary designation form that's specific for Fidelity or Schwab. Like, everybody has their own forms. And sometimes the power of attorney won't work, or they'll say it's expired, which is really kind of hogwash, but it's endless.
Just open it up for any other questions too. So, yeah.
So from your experiences and from what you told us, it sounds as if we shouldn't just sit down if we have not done any of these preparations. You shouldn't just sit down and talk about it. We should start it right away and put some energy and effort into it, so we're not trying to get caught up from behind when something does happen. And now is the time to do these things.
Yeah, now is the time to start. So his question was like, how do we get started? Again, it takes time, it takes understanding, it takes conversations, it takes process. Like I said, I would start with powers of attorney. So get, and there's the elder law attorney or elder law lawyers there's a specific designation, there's a specific exam they have to sit for. It's the NALA.org is the association. I've got that in my book. So, I mean, and again, a trust or estate lawyer might be able to do these as well, but you don't want like an ambulance chaser drawing up I mean, you could. Or you don't want to go to LegalZoom because, you're checking boxes. You have no idea what kind of legal ramifications you're getting yourself into. So, hopefully maybe you have a tax accountant, maybe you have a financial advisor, hopefully you have an elder law attorney. So you can look on the website, you can look up the association or talk to your friends, because usually word of mouth still works for me. And the states, it's so state specific. So when we lived in California, and my husband's a CPA and he's super smart about all this stuff, life insurance, investments, whatever. So in California, we had a trust. So we had a trust. We moved to New Jersey. We dissolved the trust because trusts do not work in New Jersey. That's not beneficial for taxes or anything else. We moved to Arizona. First thing we did was set up a trust. So it just depends. And then for a state that you do have a trust, you have to go through the pain and suffering of putting your assets in the trust. So the trust is a legal document or a bucket that protects your assets, but then you have to put, again, that beneficiary designation, all that stuff. The trust has to be named. Like, it's mind-boggling. But if you have the professionals that you need, they know how to do this stuff and they will help you, but you have to start somewhere. So again, start with the powers of attorney, mental, medical, financial. Start there.
I found out with my husband, everybody thinks about the power of attorney for the person who's got dementia. But I hadn't thought about that he can't have his name on any of our documents. So they all had to be changed because he had power of attorney for all of us. And so all those documents had to be changed because his name couldn't be on them anymore.
Right. A lot of times when you do a power of attorney, you can designate an alternate. So, A and B, 1 and 2. But the other thing that they advise when we met with our attorney is, yes, it's usually typical to have your spouse, right? And then when you create your will, they call it a sweetheart will. So they're basically mirror images of you. What's mine is yours, what's yours is mine. But as we age, it's better to kind of pass it down to the next generation. I mean, if if you trust your kids and or your pastor or someone, and someone younger than you, like 20 years younger than you, because chances are one or both of you is gonna have something, and then when you have some kind of health crisis, your first thing's not gonna be like, oh, I need to change all the POAs, because now I might have a health crisis. And 30% of caregivers die before the person they're caring for because they're so exhausted and they neglect their own health and they neglect all their own doctor's appointments. So, and then it gets even higher. By the time you're 70% of caregivers pass away before the person they're caring for. So, yeah.
Along that line is that the spouse, if the two people are living together, the spouse is always going to go in denial he or she does not want to identify that their spouse has dementia or Alzheimer's or whatever. So it is also then, when you create your documents, that you don't put the spouse as the decision maker, because the decision maker won't be able to make any decision. So it's wise to go outside of that scheme, or a child or whatever. For myself, my husband has no decision making, because I know, God love him, he won't be able to, because he wants to keep me around. For what? But that is the aspect of understanding that you just need to have some other people. Your aunt was an excellent one. The other thing is physicians do not want to sign anything, because they do not want to sign a death record, because they feel it's going to go on their scoring. So many under me have died because of it. And there's somebody probably keeping some record. So physicians, surgeons especially, do never want to identify. So it's very hard to get a 2-signature for complacency, because they just don't want to agree to it.
Yeah, for capacity. Yeah. No, I mean, and doctors want to heal, right? They go to they take the Hippocratic Oath. They want to heal. They want to do every procedure, every drug, every whatever. They want to keep you alive at all costs. Or so even if so that's why the post is so important. So in the post, and then when you assign that person to be your medical power of attorney, your healthcare advocate, they've got to be a strong person. They won't just be like, won't back down when the doctor says, no, let's try this, or no, we need to do this. They need like, no, I know mom didn't. My mom always, she says every day, I want to die, I shouldn't be here, and whatever, what are you going to do? I'm like, Mom, I'm not going to jail, so I'm sorry, I'm not going to off you. So the doctors want to heal. They want to do every single thing that they can. There's another good book that I just got done reading. It's called The Lost Art of Dying by, I think her name is Dugal, but they talk about ars moriendi. So it's an ancient term, and it was a pamphlet that they published in the 14th century that talked about the art of dying and the art of dying well. And people died a lot younger back then, and they all had community. So, but she's a physician, and she talks about the opening story in her book is how this one gentleman, he was super elderly, he died on the table, but his daughters are like, no, keep him alive at all costs. So they did chest compressions. You can break your ribs, and the elderly, they break your ribs. They got him back with the paddles after like 20 minutes. So then 4 hours later, get the code blue. They go in there, they do it again, they save him. They say, the daughter's like, no, you have to save him. So here he is again, he gets saved again. And then I think by the third time, like 6 hours later, again, the whole staff runs in there, the compressions, the paddles, the intravenous, and then I think finally he ended up passing. But it's like, because his daughters were, so that's why you have to have these conversations, because I don't know what he wanted. We don't know what he wanted, but his daughters were like, no, we want to keep him alive. We don't want to lose our father. So that's why, yeah.
I'm hearing that possibly a power of attorney from another state is no good here.
I'm not an attorney, so I don't know. Like, I think they are somewhat, but anytime you have a major life event, like you move, you have a child, you have a divorce, you always want to review all of your documents. Like, so if there's nothing else, then yes, it might work, but I would check with an attorney. Or if you have nothing else, like I said, sometimes they're like, oh no, this one expired. Well, they really don't expire. And but again, it depends on if a bank doesn't want to recognize that power of attorney, they have that right, and so then you have no recourse. So yeah.
Do you know anything about if your investments are with companies? I'm under the understanding that I can just, my power of attorney, and just take the death certificate, send it to them, and the people are all listed as beneficiaries,
okay.
And they can just send the check to the beneficiaries then.
Yeah, so I don't know how, unfortunately I haven't been through the whole death certificate process yet, but as long as with your financial institutions or whoever you're working with, as long as you have those beneficiary documents specific to those financial institutions, then the money should go to whoever you designated as the beneficiary. And yes, maybe they require a death certificate to release the funds, right? And so that is one thing that I've heard is if your person dies, you want to get 5 to 10 copies of the death certificate because you're going to have to be sending them around. And sometimes they require an original with the embossed seal, and sometimes they'll accept a copy. Again, it just depends. The other thing that you can do with your Social Security account is you can designate someone as a representative payee. So I learned about this later. So my mom's Social Security was going into her Wells Fargo account, and my aunt was managing that because she had the power of attorney, and it was in Maryland, and so everything went in there, and she worked with the bank, and so she was just managing that. So we were paying, when we sold her house, we were paying bills to get the house ready for sale and everything out of that account, and we had the POA. But then the other, so I as a daughter can sign up to become a representative payee, which I have not done because it's, again, then it's almost like conservatorship. Then you have to do it, they do an audit every year, and you have to, you have to explain why you spent this and how you spent this and on her behalf, which is a good control to have, but we're managing so much. So when I got control of all her assets, I took everything to Charles Schwab and I opened up a special account in my mom's trust and in my name, and so everything comes out of that. And so all the sale from the house, everything went into that account. And then the Wells Fargo is still sitting. And then I actually ended up moving her Social Security payments from the Wells Fargo account into that special account. But if anything goes wrong, and I have no recourse, because again, to become a representative payee, you have to go through all this paperwork, you have to meet with the people. But if you are in control of your SSA.gov account right now, you can go in there and type in a name and a number and everything. And I did that after the fact once I hacked into her account. But the guy at the Social Security was like, nope. So I don't know what magic wand they have back there, but he was not buying it. He had, but again, like I have whack-a-mole. I only have so much energy to get done what I need to get done. So right now, the payments are still coming. But again, in the grand scheme of things, so her Social Security is maybe $2,500 a month, but her memory care is $10,000 a month. So yeah, so luckily she had her house in Los Angeles, and it quadrupled in value in the 20 years she lived there. But not everybody has a house in LA to sell. So if you're really poor and you're on Medicaid, you qualify for Medicaid, dual eligibility, you can go into all techs and all that stuff, then you're covered for long-term care. Or if you're really wealthy, then you can pay for private care, private memory care. But if you're in the middle, so the one estimate I saw is for someone to fund a memory care or long-term care for someone with dementia, the average is $350,000 over the rest of their lifetime. And dementia, my mom is super physically healthy. She could live another 20 years. It's so individual, you don't know. So she could live 20 years at $10,000 a month, and that adds up. So I don't know. We'll come to that bridge when we cross it. But it behooves you to, again, make a plan, make a financial plan, make a medical plan, but you can't, you can't hit it all in one shot. Like, okay, Sunday afternoon in 3 hours, we're gonna knock all this out. No, it's not gonna happen. You need the professionals, you can talk to your friends. And the other thing I say is don't do it at the holidays. The holidays are stressful enough. You don't want to be at the Thanksgiving dinner table. So Mom, do you want a feeding tube and intubation? So I tell people, but I do tell people, like my friends, I was like, if you're gathering for the holidays, pay attention to your parents, your aunt and uncle. Like, are they a little slower? Is one spouse covering for the other? Because that happens a lot. Because my other friend, he's like, well, my parents were fine, but then my dad passed away suddenly of a heart attack, and then he'd been covering for Mom for years. She's had dementia. We had no idea because he was taking care of her. So that, again, that's why you want the next generation or someone younger you trust on your documents, because if one person has a major event and passes, and the other person, even if they don't have dementia, they're going to be grief-stricken. It's going to be hard, and they're not going to have a straight head on their shoulders. So, but anyway, so use the holidays to observe how things are going, observe how they're interacting. Just kind of spend some time, and then kind of make a mental note that, hey, I need to I need to travel to go see mom and dad and see how their home situation is, or I need to talk to the siblings and see. Sibling dynamics is a whole other, like I said, my sister lived 10 minutes from my mom. I was in Jersey. She's like, you deal with it. And I said, okay. So I started to deal with it, and then she would come over and tell me everything I was doing wrong and what I should do and what I shouldn't do. I'm like, oh, you want to do it? No, but you're doing it wrong. Okay. So she, we're made up now. I literally blocked her from everything. I didn't talk to her for 2 years. I was done. And so we finally reconciled, because her son and my son are both at U of A. So, but I mean, yeah, I was not, I was like, I'm doing it, but just get out of my way. So, yeah.
I got 2 things. Just, you talked about the 5 wishes.
Okay.
And just so you guys know, all of the hospices in town have 5 wishes books for free.
Here.
So
No, we just need this mostly.
Harmony Hospice is at Madera Plaza. They have them. You can get 20 copies if you want to take them to your families at the holiday, but tell them you'll talk about it in May. So you have to do it at the holiday. And then the other thing that in my world of dealing with this and dementia is that a lot of our loved ones, we promise them we'll never put them in a facility. Right? Tell your loved ones how much you love them, but tell them, if you really love me, if I have to put you in a facility, please understand that I have to. It's one of the things that tore my mother apart, was having to put my dad in a facility because she could not take care of him anymore at home. No way. So just use that with your loved ones.
Thank you. Yeah, talk to her. She knows her stuff. Well, the other thing I'll say is the language. The language matters. So instead of saying, Dad, you're doing this wrong, and you need to get your will done, and you need to get your stuff together, and you need to figure this out, you flip the script, and it's all about I'm worried about you. I love you. I'm so crying. I'm concerned about you, and I want us to work through this together. And you have to please help me, because I want this to work out. I don't want to get the call, and I don't want this to be chaotic. I want this to be how you want it to be, and I want it to be with your wishes and your desires, and I want you to drive this. I want you to make the decisions, but I can't make those decisions if you don't share with me what you want. So if you just go or tell your kid, if they come, or you, I've got to come from a place of I instead of the accusing you. It's from I want to help. How can we work through this together? And it happens through conversations. And so what they say is people, the 2 things they want, they don't want to be a burden to their kids, and they want to leave their kids a little bit of money. But if you don't plan, you're going to be a huge burden when all hell breaks loose, when something goes south with your health, and you're going to burn through that money lickety-split. So it just behooves you to kind of make a plan. It's not easy. It's a lot, like I said, and I do have a ton of resources. So when I started going through this, I was all over social media, the internet, podcasts, movies, and I just gathered the things that I thought were most helpful. Because I call this the wild, wild west of eldercare. Everybody's out there to scam, make a buck, build a business, whatever. So there's a lot of noise out there. But there are really good people that have been in hospice and eldercare. The other thing I'll say is, yeah, we promised we would never put Mom, I never made that promise, but never put him in a home. But that was when nursing homes were these dank, institutionalized, dark, horrible places. Like, that was like a horror movie. But now it's CCRC, it's cruise ship living. They're building La Posada 10 minutes from my house. It is like high end, but you pay for it. So, and my mom is like, again, $10,000 a month. Watermark, it's their Elon line is high, but there's issues. Like, it's beautiful. They don't have a lot of caregiver turnover, but there's always going to be issues. Nothing's perfect. And so I lead the memory care family liaison group between the memory care families and the community. So we meet and we talk about, what's going on, what are you noticing, how can we help? So so until there's a cure, there's a community. You just have to engage. So more questions? Yeah.
I just have another comment. We're a very mobile society, and we travel a lot. You were traveling all over the country. And one thing that I have suggested to people is that if you do a power of attorney or medical care, and you have your list of your medications and your diagnosis and everything, put it on a piece of paper and put it in your glove compartment or in your suitcase so that when you travel, they have access to your medical care, because you're not going to be in Green Valley, Arizona when something happens. So consider that also in your plans.
Yeah, so it's called Vial of Life. So vialoflife.com, and I'll send it to Jerry. vialoflife.com. So this nurse told me about this. So it's a one-page thing, and because I said, you're a nurse, you've been doing this. She said, having the medication list is critical. What's in their body, what's on their body, any recent falls or issues. It has your emergency contact number. It has your meds. It has, it's one page, and you can print it off the internet, and you can tape it to your fridge, and you can keep a copy in your suitcase and a copy in your glove box. That way, wherever you are, somebody, give a copy to your loved ones. So it's just basically a one-page cheat sheet of you. It's a snapshot of your health right now, and it will be golden to the EMTs and to the physicians or anybody who's caring for you. And it's not that hard to do. Probably take you 10 minutes to fill out, and then you're good to go. But it will be critical, especially if you've got a time-sensitive health issue. So, for example, when I went to to Iowa to go to the normal pressure hydrocephalus brain surgery with my dad, he had gone to his pre-op and everything appointment, and then I come in, and he had to use this bottle to wash with antibacterial stuff, whatever, fine. I said, well, what about your meds, Dad? Like, are you supposed to take your meds? Are you not supposed to take your meds? Like, I don't know if anesthesia interacts or what they're doing or if it affects the brain. It's like, I don't know. I'm like, okay. So we finally get to the hospital. We're waiting because I'm like, well, don't take your morning meds because I don't know what did they tell you? He couldn't remember. So finally they come in and they explained to me, they said, no, if he's on meds for blood pressure and regulation and things, they said that we don't want his normal state of his body and his pathology to go wacko while he's on the operating table. We want to keep the meds in his system that he has in his system. And I said, well, that makes sense, but you could have come in and said, well, no, this drug interacts with this. And so he just, again, you've got to pay attention to these things. And so meds are important to know what meds. And then the other thing is if you have a hospital incident, when you go to the hospital, then they give you their own version of meds, and then they might assign new meds, and then you get home, and then you've got the old meds and the new meds and the hospital meds. And so then pretty soon people are up to like 15 prescriptions, and they don't really know what are duplicates or what they're for, or what they're supposed to stop, or how long they're supposed to take them. And if you're on more than 4 meds, your chance of falling is 100%. 100% if you're on more than 4 medications. That's that Atul Gawande's Being Mortal book. So pay attention to your meds, have your physician review your meds with you. What, do I need this? What's it for? And even also vitamins and supplements, that all affects your pathology. So just do a check on where you are in your meds and what they're supposed to be for. So that will, again, there's a lot to manage. Yeah.
So one more question.
I was just going to make a comment. I think your Vial of Life and some other things are available at the fire department here.
Yep, I have heard that, yeah. Vial of Life, and the fire department has their own, cheat sheet and like a plastic sheath with a red sticker, and so you can go to your fire department and get that too.
And they tell you to put it in your car.
Yeah, car, fridge, suitcase, just copy it and plaster it all over. Yeah.
You can also put it on a flash drive.
Oh, flash drive?
Just plug it in at the hospital.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm app challenged and tech challenged, but a flash drive, if you're the techie person, you have it on the flash drive. Yeah.
You can also have it on your phone. Most phones have an app, and some people have biometrics to open the phone. But if you don't, you can hit a button that'll say medical info. So it's not opening, but it's an emergency. It pulls up my blood type, my address, my emergency contacts, my medications, my allergies. So most of us have a phone. So I would find the app that works on your phone so that anyone can open it.
Yeah. Get a 10-year-old to help you in that. Yeah, no, and I have the ICE contacts. In case of emergency, I have a few of those in there, but that's the extent of my technology. I'm trying to think of what else. I mean, there's so much, but have the conversations. Have the conversation with yourself, your spouse, your kids, your loved ones. we've got to start talking about this. I know it was taboo. It used to be taboo to talk about finances and health, and remember when nobody could say cancer? It was the C word. You didn't say cancer. Well, now it's like dementia. Nobody wants to talk about dementia, but it is everywhere. If you're, let's see, what it's like, age 10% of everybody over 65 has dementia, and there's 9 basic types. So you guys know that dementia is the umbrella term, right, and all that. So there's kind of 9 basic types, but they're, and every person is different, every presentation is different, every progression is different. It's very individual. Oh, and the other thing I'll tell you is it's usually a close observer who notices the changes. So you might not notice it or you might deny it, but it's a coworker, a spouse, a child, a faith community member that notices that something's slipping. And so that now they're saying for the primary care physicians, if they're not good at diagnosing dementia, but if you bring an observer, like I was brought to the neurology appointment, even though I got sent out, to like, so when my mom's saying, yes, 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 I'm back here going, no, no, no. So I mean, it's so hard. I mean, again, I could go on with 9 million stories about this stuff.
I think that you skipped over you mentioned it, but quickly, about the ICE. I find a lot of people don't know about that. Could you just say more for us? Yeah,
ICE stands for in case of emergency. Yeah. And so you can put an ICE, you can designate an ICE person in your phone. And I have an Apple phone, so it comes up with a red asterisk. So I have my husband, my aunt, and one of my daughters as my ICE people in my phone. Because, I mean, yeah, who knows? Yeah, I mean, yeah, anything else?
Sounds good.
More questions? Are you good?
So you'll be able to hang around.
Yeah.
But you should be able to hang around, so if any of you want to follow up and everything. I want to tell you that one thing that just occurred to me as I'm sitting here listening, my own story with my own mother who had dementia. I thought, boy, it was a little bit hard with my mother, but man, when I compare my mother and that journey that I made with her compared to what you've gone through, and just all of that, the challenge and all of the different ways that you really had to work with a huge amount of resistance, and that's oftentimes part of it. But this is your case really brought out a whole other dimension to it. So thank you so much for being here, for being with us, and copies of our book available. And any other things that you want to say? Again, 2 weeks from today, we'll have our a neuropsychologist with us. So come back and join us in 2 weeks and be part of that forum as well. So thank you so much for coming. All of our forums are on the website for our church. So if you go to our church's website, which is UMC, United Methodist Church-org or .org.
UMCGV.org.
UMCGV.org. Yeah, UMCGV.org.
Yeah.
Sorry. United Methodist Church, Green Valley. .org. You'll find it under CARES, Dementia CARES, I think. So, okay. Thanks so much, everybody, for coming.
Thank you.